The one thing you never hear, Puerto Ricans reaching any kind of social status of any sort whatsoever, class, dignity. I remember when I grew up, I don't know why it had to be that way, and when people make judgment on Puerto Ricans. Now, I could only tell you when I grew up, there was never any respect for Puerto Ricans, and they were the lowest class people that we ever met. Even among all the racism that exists in the world, and there's a lot of people that didn't like blacks where I grew up. It was common. Pick on somebody, pick on the blacks, whatever. But the one thing I will say, that there are a lot of good black people. There are a lot of bad black people, same as any other color. But even the black people I grew up with thought that Puerto Ricans were way lower class than the perspective, that people had on African Americans. And they were always getting into trouble, the Puerto Ricans. Always known to have knives, and they wear these pointy shoes, because if you have the flat tip shoes, you couldn't get the cockroaches that, would go in the corner of the room. So the Puerto Ricans, they developed very good technology. They developed, the kind of shoes that have pointy tips. This way, when the cockroaches do get in that corner, they can get those cockroaches real easy. Smart people. Mm-hmm. Who said they were dumb shit? I didn't. Hello, Pennywise. Where you been, man? Greetings and salutations. I finally found your new channel. Again, I'm doing okay. Got my typical Philippines boredom here, but, it is what it is. I always said in other shows, not the most exciting thing. Clint Aston is laughing. Actually, this kind of started up with Nico. Nico has maintained this character of a street person. I guess Nico makes decent money from his disability. But the one thing I've always mentioned, and something that everybody has observed besides myself, is that Nico never could fix his teeth. Oh, he spends a lot of money on fertilizer. He's got to have that grass growing just right. But it always winds up dying on him. I don't know why. It just does. Now, if he would take that money he spends on fertilizer and fixing his fence on his teeth, it might be a positive direction, considering he's an ugly bastard. So, that's just my opinion. And I'm entitled to an opinion. Once ugly, always fucking ugly. Unless you want to get plastic surgery, but with all the nerve damage he's got and all that shit. And it's not his fault. By the way, it's not his fault. There was an accident on the job when he was in the service, and it was very unfortunate. Very, very unfortunate. And he got his face blown up, and it's not a funny thing, not to laugh at. It's not a funny thing. I just want to just make it known. There was another guy, I heard a story that he's a quadriplegic amputee, both arms, both legs. But he's got a big pecker, though. So they used to call him tripod when he actually had both his legs. Yeah. Now he's the monopod. But it's a shame. It's just a crying shame. These things happen. And, you got to feel sorry for these people. I don't know, when they look in the mirror, they see this swarthy, good-looking, kind of a rendition of themselves before they got their ass blown up. But they were ugly before, and they're ugly. Not the surface appearance. So let me just straighten you out on this. It's not the surface appearance all the time. The ugliness is mostly internal. It's really not always. 75% is internal. 25% is external. So the one thing, and I remember an old friend of mine, and that was Michael Sticker, who, the guy that was into the bands. He was a roadie for Blondie and all that shit, and some other bands too. He met the Ramones or knew all these people, blah, 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 Sex Pistols, all this. Well, he went out, and this was written about too. There was a band member from, was it the Dead Boys? I can't remember. It's a long time ago. And this guy was on the street and a bunch of Puerto Ricans, of course, with knives. They met up with him and they got into this big shit. So Michael went in there to try to help this guy because he was a friend of his. And somehow Michael got involved in this. He had to be put. He was put in Rikers Island for a small period of time. He had nothing to do with the incident with his friend in the band, but it was these fucking Puerto Ricans on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. Oh, I know the area. I've been there. I've been to CBGB's. It was right down from CBGB's. And this happened many years ago. Always the Puerto Ricans with their fucking knives, man. Always with the fucking knives, you know. And I grew up in New York, and I will tell you something, and I'm going to be honest about this. I have nothing good to say about Puerto Ricans at all. Most of the Puerto Ricans you ever met never even fucking worked. I knew one guy, fantastic guy, who ran a business at the apartment building who I actually lived in. He ran a grocery store, and he was a Puerto Rican guy with a fantastic family, very respectable. If my father needed to run a little bill on there, pay him at the end of the week or something like that, he let my father do it. He was a really nice guy. Now, I'm not saying that all Puerto Ricans are bad, and maybe a lot of Puerto Ricans have gotten a really bad reputation, and maybe a lot of them really have. But I can't remember growing up with anybody who liked Puerto Ricans, more so than a racist that, didn't like the blacks. Okay, and even the blacks were saying that, I know people look down on us, racist motherfuckers and all that, but, if anybody's lower class than people perceive us to be, that would be the fucking Puerto Ricans. So I've heard this all my life. Heard it all my life. I don't know of any famous Puerto Rican people. I don't know, might be some Puerto Rican singers, but they're good in their own country. I don't know what Puerto Ricans have done for the world. I don't know if they've done for anybody. They just sit there sharpening the knives, trying to find a throat to cut. Well, anyway, the guy I mentioned that was pretty bad. I think he died from the stabbing with these low-class, lower East Side Puerto Ricans that roam the streets at night trying to rip people off in New York City. They were never respected. They were never respected. I don't respect them because I don't have anything good to say about them. I really don't. On a basic level, I just really don't. Um, and I grew up with Jews. I grew up with blacks, Irish, Italians, and so forth. And none of these groups I ever really had a hard time with. My grandparents grew up on First Street in Mount Vernon, and it turned out to be a predominantly black neighborhood later on. You know, uh, my grandparents accepted them; they accepted him. A great existence. Nobody bothered each other. People were just trying to go on with their lives, and trying to get food on the table. And I never really got bothered by black people growing up. There were some rowdy ones in our high school when they started segregation and all this stuff, or desegregation rather, desegregation in my school. And yeah, they were assholes there. They would bust up the bathroom and then tell the, I don't know, high school administrator that you really need to fix up these bathrooms around here when they destroyed them. And it was them, the knot hairs for when they would comb their hair with that special little comb that would, and all these knot hairs would fall out into the sink. And you know who was in there last. There you go. Of course, most blacks have straight hair these days, but we've come a long way. There's such a mix in the ethnicity in the world that's going on right now. You can't tell who's black, who's white, who's what anymore. Such an intermixture. Look at the Hawaiians. They've mixed with everybody. There's no true Hawaiians left. And it's just one big fucking crazy place. Well, the intermixing goes on, and one day there ain't going to be no blacks in America unless they actually come from Africa, because this intermixing that's going on now is so much that, mulattoes, you're getting just a bunch of mulattoes, and the next generation gets lighter and lighter. And all the features, the lips, the nose, and everything else has basically changed radically, too, if you notice that. And as you see how Michael Jackson went through some changes, he went through a lot of changes since he was a little kid. Of course, he turned out to be a freakazoid with too many operations. His face was practically melting. But, that's Michael Jackson, though. But I don't know. I'd like to say something good about Puerto Ricans. Chicks are good looking. Some of the chicks are good looking. Actually, I like I like Hispanics and Latinos. There's some good looking women. Yeah, I've actually dated a Mexican girl actually briefly when I was well, I didn't date her. I had one night with her, whatever. What the hell? Wait, what happened that night? Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did do her. Okay, I did. Mexican, American, Mexican, Mexican, Mexican. Yeah, she's a hot number. Spicy. They're spicy, just like the foods they eat. Hey, I love everybody. I love everybody. Can't say I'm loved back by everybody, but I love everybody, actually. No matter what ethnicity you are. Puerto Rico is going to stay. They want to become a state, but it's just never going to happen. Just not going to happen. You know, there's just a territory of the United States, and that's the way they're going to stay. That's the way it should be. Leave them in that little corner of the world and let them do their little Puerto Rican things and manufacture their knives and teach their children how to use a knife properly for the next neck they're going to, cut somebody's throat for the next neck they're going to cut. I don't know. I tell you, they get no respect. They get no respect at all. But why? Well, their reputation precedes them. Historically, I don't know anybody's ever liked Puerto Ricans. Have you ever liked a Puerto Rican? I don't like Puerto Ricans. They're so low class. Not that we should measure the world in class systems, and I really think that's what divides us. It really does divide us. Putting people into class systems, low class, middle class, high class, how white your skin is or how dark your skin is. It's a horrible world. It's a really horrible world out there. And we shouldn't judge each other like that. But Puerto Ricans are different. That's a breed. They're like a step above cockroaches. And, this battle they've had all their life with cockroaches led them to new technology with shoes. I thought it was brilliant. Actually, you could only get a cockroach, and if you corner them, you could only, get them if you're going to use more of a blunt surface, rather than, well, they tried to use blunt surfaces. That was the problem. Yeah, that was the problem. But then they realized, they woke up, they said when the cockroach goes in that corner, if you try to take your foot and kind of crush him in the corner, force your foot forward, it wasn't going to get that cockroach because it was right in between two pieces of wall. But then they figured out, well, will we make our shoes pointy? Sure, we can get those motherfuckers right in the corner, man. We got it made in the shade. That was probably the most brilliant things that Puerto Ricans ever really did. Seriously, I'm very proud of them for that. I don't know of any famous people that are Puerto Rican. I don't even like Puerto Rican food. Okay. I never dated a Puerto Rican. I don't want to date a Puerto Rican. I don't have anything good to say about Puerto Ricans. At all. Never did. I've seen what they did in New York. I've seen what they did. I know what they did. How they hurt people, robbed people, knifed people. Did I tell you they like knives? They love knives. Horrible. Horrible, horrible. They'd show up in the subways. They'd show up in the dark streets like a fucking cockroach. Knives in hand, newly sharpened. And they go around robbing people in their cars by knife point. Everything is knives, 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 knives. Most Puerto Ricans could not afford a fucking gun. They couldn't afford a gun. But they always carried a knife. I don't care if it was a switchblade. I don't care if it was a kitchen knife. But you never find a Puerto Rican without a weapon. A weapon not being a gun. Very rare. It happens, though. But they always had a knife by their side. They always had a knife somewhere in their shoes, whatever. Then they got really invented. Oh, some of the more educated ones. They actually developed a system where a knife could pop out of the tip of their shoe by tapping on their heel. Oh, for real. I think they're the ones that invented that. So, if they lose their other knife they keep in their back pocket, all they have to do is tap their shoe. And I think they use spy pictures, too. They actually influence some spy pictures, And you all got to do it. It's really inventive. You tap your shoe, your heel, and this fucking knife comes right out of the pointy of your shoe in the front. Boom, comes right out. Spring-loaded. Amazing stuff. Who says they don't have any technology? But knives. Knives. When I think of Puerto Ricans, I think of knives. I think of Harlem. Oh, my God. I remember the night that I almost got stuck on Simpson Street on the subway.